My wife's demand for divorce was meant to shatter me, to unravel the very fabric of my existence. But instead of the expected tears, the pathetic begging she so clearly anticipated, a genuine, undeniable smile of relief bloomed on my face. 15 years of shared history, of supposed devotion, crumbled in that instant, revealing the truth beneath the illusion. She never understood. She never realized I was 10 steps ahead, or that her deepest secret was, in fact, no secret at all. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. What she never comprehended was just how profoundly strong I would become, or the staggering cost that strength would ultimately exact from her. My name is Jack Reynolds, I'm 46, and this is the gripping chronicle of how my wife's betrayal became the catalyst for the greatest transformation of my life. I met Sarah at my buddy Mike's barbecue a decade and a half ago. She drifted into the backyard, a vision in a sundress, her blonde hair crowned with sunglasses, commanding every gaze. I wasn't seeking anything serious then. My fledgling construction company consumed 70-hour weeks, but Sarah, with a single smile, altered the trajectory of my world. "You're staring," she teased, catching me red-handed, a plate of ribs clutched in my hand. "Sorry," I replied, my face flushing. It's not every day a guy sees someone who makes the sun look dim by comparison. Her laughter, sweet and genuine, sealed our fate. 6 months later, I proposed on a boat bobbing on Lake Michigan. A year after that, we bought our beautiful colonial in Oakwood Heights, its sprawling yard promising a future filled with children we dreamed of. The early years were everything I'd envisioned. Sarah was my unwavering support, celebrating every new contract for Reynolds Construction as if we'd struck gold. When I worked late, she'd bring dinner to the office. When stress threatened to overwhelm me, she intuitively knew whether to offer words or simply be there. We were solid, I thought. Kids never came, a cruel twist of fate according to the doctors, but we made our peace, and I poured my energy into forging our financial security. By our 10th anniversary, Reynolds Construction boasted 30 employees and projects spanning 3 states. I gifted Sarah a Mercedes for her birthday, and we spent 2 glorious weeks in Hawaii. Life in its purest form was good, until it wasn't. The shift was subtle, a creeping shadow. First, trivial things. She stopped asking about my day, retired early, became inseparable from her phone. When I inquired, "Is everything okay?" she'd cite exhaustion or her interior design clients. Then came the later nights, girls' evenings that grew increasingly frequent. Unfamiliar, expensive clothes began appearing in her closet, never worn in my presence. Her phone would chime at ungodly hours, calls answered in hushed tones from another room. Last Thanksgiving, I orchestrated a surprise anniversary dinner, believing 15 years together deserved something extraordinary. Our favorite restaurant, Flowers the Works. She never arrived. A text at 9:30 p.m. Her friend Jenna had an emergency breakup, needed support. I ate alone, the celebratory chatter of other couples a cruel backdrop to my cooling steak. When she finally stumbled in past midnight, her hair reeked of a cologne that wasn't mine. "How's Jenna doing?" I asked from the darkened living room couch. Sarah startled. "Jesus, Jack, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" "Waiting for my wife to come home from our anniversary dinner," I replied, the words a quiet hammer blow. She froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, that was tonight!" I completely forgot. The look on her face wasn't guilt. It was the naked annoyance of being caught. That was the moment I should have known. Instead, I swallowed my pride, accepted her hollow apology, and retreated to a solitary bed. I was building our dream life. She was constructing an exit strategy. I was immersed in a grueling 14-hour day on a major waterfront development when I found it. The receipt, tucked into our laundry room, a silent traitor. It had fallen from Sarah's coat pocket. A hotel bill from the lakeside resort just 2 towns over. The date? Last Tuesday, when she claimed to be at her sister's place in Milwaukee. My stomach clenched, a cold fist of dread, but I maintained my composure. 2 decades of running construction sites had etched one crucial lesson into my very being: think before you act. I pocketed the receipt, uttering not a single word. That weekend, I rose before dawn and drove to my fishing cabin at Crystal Lake, a sanctuary I'd built with my own hands before Sarah entered my life. The water's solitude always cleared my head. I cast my line, allowing the quiet to envelop me, remembering my father's wisdom when I'd started my business. Son, a man who doesn't control his emotions will never control his life. By Sunday night, my decision was cast in stone. No confrontation, no desperate pleas. I would let this play out, all the while safeguarding everything I had built. First thing Monday, I called my attorney, Frank. I need to review my assets quietly. Everything okay, Jack? He inquired, a hint of concern in his voice. Just being strategic, I replied. That evening, Sarah was uncharacteristically home early, perched nervously on a kitchen bar stool as I walked in. We need to talk, she announced, twisting her wedding ring. I pulled a beer from the fridge, popped the cap against the counter's edge. So, talk. I think we should get a divorce. I took a slow, deliberate pull from the bottle, set it down, and met her gaze. Then I did something that utterly disarmed her. I smiled. Okay, I said, my voice as steady as steel. Her mouth opened slightly. Okay, that's all you have to say? What were you expecting? Begging? Tears? I leaned against the counter. If you want out, there's the door. She blinked rapidly, her carefully rehearsed script clearly derailed. Don't you even want to know why? Not particularly. I took another sip. But I'm guessing his name is Eric. He drives that black Audi I've seen following you, and the lakeside resort knows you too well by now. The color drained from her face. You knew? I know enough. I pushed off the counter and strode toward my home office. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. Should be pretty straightforward. Wait, what about the house? Our accounts? Panic clawed at her voice. I turned, meeting her desperate gaze. You asked for a divorce, Sarah. You've got it. But don't think for a second you're taking what I've built. The sheer shock on her face was a masterpiece, worth every penny I'd already paid Frank to protect my assets. She'd anticipated tears and negotiation. Instead, she got a man who refused to be played. Upstairs, I locked my office door and, for the first time in months, truly smiled. The suffocating weight was lifting. My wife had just asked for a divorce, and against all odds, I felt something akin to joy. The next morning, Sarah slipped out early for work, barely making eye contact. I waited 20 minutes, then ventured into our bedroom. It was time to ascertain the depth of this rabbit hole. The second phone lay in her nightstand, clumsily hidden beneath a stack of scarves. An amateur move. Even worse, no password. I scrolled through countless messages between her and Eric. 11 months they'd been seeing each other. Hotel receipts, flight confirmations, elaborate plans to move in together once our divorce was finalized. Most damning were the financial discussions. Jack has no idea about the business accounts, she'd written. Once I file, I can push for half of everything. I meticulously photographed every incriminating detail, then returned the phone exactly as I'd found it. Next, her home office. In the shredder bin, I discovered torn fragments of her bank statements. Painstakingly, like a complex puzzle, I reassembled them, revealing multiple transfers to an account I didn't recognize. My blood boiled, but I channeled that inferno into action. I called my business partner, Tom. Remember that buyout clause we added to our partnership agreement? I asked. I need to activate it today. Everything okay, Jack? Concern laced his voice. It will be, just covering my bases. By noon, all my personal assets were secured in new accounts, and my ownership stake in Reynolds Construction was impenetrable. Sarah could try to come after my money, but she'd find nothing but locked doors. That evening, I was reviewing documents when Sarah burst in, her face flushed with fury. What did you do? She demanded, waving her phone. Eric says the house title is only in your name. That's impossible. I looked up calmly. Is it? Check the refinancing papers you signed last year. I didn't read the fine print, she admitted, deflating slightly. That's unfortunate. For you. I returned to my paperwork. You can't do this. Her voice rose. I'm entitled to half. I rose slowly, towering over her. Half of what precisely? Half of the business I built while you were sleeping with Eric? Half of the house I paid for while you were planning your exit? I don't think so. She recoiled, a flicker of something akin to fear in her eyes. Not fear of harm, for I would never touch her, but fear of reality crashing down. When you married me, I said quietly, you thought you were getting a simple contractor who wouldn't notice being played. Big mistake. She left the room without another word. Later, I heard her on the phone frantically explaining to Eric that their golden parachute had just failed to open. The divorce papers arrived via certified mail 3 days later. Sarah's attorney, a sharply dressed woman named Vanessa Rodriguez, requested a meeting at her downtown office. I brought Frank, along with a thick folder of evidence. Vanessa greeted us with practiced cordiality, then launched into her practice speech. Mrs. Reynolds is seeking an equitable division of marital assets, including the family home, retirement accounts, and a 50% interest in Reynolds Construction. Frank and I exchanged glances. Before we continue, I said, sliding my folder across the table, you might want to review these materials. Vanessa flipped through the documents. Hotel receipts, screenshots of Sarah's conversations about hiding assets, bank transfers made without my knowledge. With each page, her professional veneer cracked a little further. I'll need to confer with my client, she said finally, her voice strained. Of course, Frank replied smoothly. While you do, we should discuss the prenuptial agreement. Prenup? Vanessa's eyebrows shot up. There's no prenup in our records. I smiled. Check again. Filed with the county clerk 15 years ago. Mrs. Rodriguez, your client hasn't been entirely forthcoming with you. After Vanessa left to make a call, Frank turned to me. She's realizing she's got a losing case. I nodded. Sarah thought I was the same guy who proposed to her on that boat. She forgot I've spent 15 years outmaneuvering competitors who try to take what's mine. When Vanessa returned, her tone had shifted dramatically. My client is open to discussing a more conservative settlement. Conservative isn't a word I'd use, I replied. Your client committed financial fraud, engaged in adultery, well documented in ways that would humiliate her if made public, and breached her fiduciary duty as my spouse. Vanessa paled slightly. What are you proposing? Sarah walks away with her personal belongings, her car, and a one-time payment of $50,000. In exchange, she signs a complete release of all claims against me, my business, and my property. Oh, and she has 2 weeks to vacate my house. That's absurdly generous, Frank interjected, considering the alternative is a very public, very detailed divorce trial. As we left, Vanessa was already dialing her client. I knew what Sarah's answer would be. She'd always cared more about her reputation than anything else. Sarah agreed to the settlement terms but demanded a face-to-face meeting for closure. Against Frank's advice, I agreed. We'd been married 15 years. I owed her at least that much. I suggested the steakhouse where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. I arrived early, ordered a bourbon neat, and waited. She swept in 20 minutes late, looking as if she'd stepped out of a magazine, new haircut, designer dress, full makeup. The woman who once wore my old t-shirts to bed was gone. Even more surprisingly, she wasn't alone. Eric trailed behind her, tall, slick, and about 10 years my junior. Bold move, I nodded as they sat down. This is Eric, she said. I met his eyes. He looked away first. A paper tiger. You want to talk, I said to Sarah, so talk. She straightened her shoulders. I want to explain why things happen this way. Let me guess, I interrupted. You weren't happy. I worked too much. Eric understands. Did I miss anything? Eric leaned forward. Look, man, nobody planned for this to happen. Sometimes people just connect, you know? I turned to him slowly. Did I address you? He blinked, then looked to Sarah for support. She jumped in quickly. Eric's right. We didn't mean to hurt you. But now that everything's settled, I wanted you to know it wasn't all bad between us. I took a slow sip of bourbon. Is that what you need to tell yourself? Jack, please. No, Sarah. You didn't bring him here for my closure. You brought him here for yours. You need me to be the angry ex-husband so you can justify what you did. She flushed. That's not true. It is. And here's something you don't want to hear. I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. Eric snorted. Grateful? Your wife's leaving you? That's rich. Grateful she showed her true colors before I wasted any more years. I turned back to Sarah. You did me a favor. We had 15 years together, she said, her voice rising. You can't just erase that. I'm not erasing anything. I'm seeing it clearly for the first time. I finished my drink and stood. The divorce will be final in 60 days. I'd appreciate it if you cleared out of the house by the end of the week. Eric put his arm around her. Don't worry, babe. We'll be in our new place soon anyway. I dropped a 20 on the table. Good luck with that. Eric's credit application for your dream apartment was denied yesterday. Her head snapped toward Eric. What? I have friends in banking, I explained. They mentioned someone with Eric's name and terrible credit score was applying for a luxury rental, using your income as collateral. Interesting, isn't it? I left them staring at each other, the first cracks already showing in their perfect little fantasy. The confrontation with Sarah and Eric triggered an unexpected chain reaction. 2 days later, I came home to find Sarah packing frantically, her eyes red and swollen. You were right about him, she blurted when she saw me. Eric's been lying about everything, his job, his money, all of it. I leaned against the doorframe. And you're telling me this because? Because I made a terrible mistake. She stepped toward me. Maybe we could. I raised my hand. There is no any more, Sarah. Her face crumpled. I have nowhere to go. Eric's gone and my sister won't take me in. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The guest room is yours until Friday, I said. After that, you're on your own. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in, and the power went out around midnight. I was checking the circuit breakers when I heard glass shattering. Grabbing a flashlight, I rushed upstairs to find my office window broken. A man was climbing through. Eric, soaking wet and clearly drunk. Where is she? He slurred, stumbling toward me. Get out of my house, I warned, standing my ground. Not without Sarah. She took my car keys. He lunged at me clumsily. 20 years of construction work builds muscle that desk jobs don't. I sidestepped easily, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to slam him against the wall. Last warning, I growled, pinning him there. He struggled, then suddenly pulled a knife from his pocket. Back off. Sarah appeared in the doorway, screaming as Eric slashed wildly. I caught his wrist, twisted hard, and heard the knife clatter to the floor. One solid punch to his jaw, and he crumpled. Call the police, I told Sarah, keeping my foot firmly on Eric's chest. When the officers arrived, they found the knife, the broken window, and a very subdued Eric. Sarah confirmed everything. They took him away in handcuffs, charging him with breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted burglary. As the police car drove off, Sarah turned to me, shivering. You saved my life. I defended my home, I corrected her. She reached for my hand. Jack, after what you just did for me, don't. I stepped back. This doesn't change anything between us. Her eyes welled up. How can you be so cold? I'm not being cold, Sarah. I'm being clear. What we had is over. I walked back inside, leaving her on the porch. The storm had passed, but the damage was done. To the window, to our marriage, to any lingering feelings I might have had. Some things, once broken, can never be fixed. The police report about Eric's break-in hit the local news cycle. I hadn't expected that. Pine Ridge was a small enough town that a drunken ex-boyfriend with a knife made for exciting gossip. By Thursday, my phone was buzzing with concerned calls from neighbors and business associates. Jack Reynolds, the guy who fought off an intruder barehanded, Tom teased when I walked into our offices. You're practically a local legend now. I brushed it off. Just doing what anyone would do. Not everyone, Tom countered. Most would have run or gotten hurt. Speaking of which, how's the hand? I flexed my right hand, bruised from connecting with Eric's jaw. Functional. After my morning meetings, I drove to the house to check on the new security system I'd ordered. Motion sensors, cameras at every entry point, and reinforced windows. The security technician was finishing up when Sarah arrived looking uncomfortable. "You're really going all out," she commented, watching a man install a keypad by the front door. "Recent events made it necessary," I replied coolly. After the technician left, Sarah lingered in the kitchen, fidgeting with her purse strap. "Jack, about what happened with Eric. It's handled. He could have killed you. But he didn't." I entered the new security code, testing the system. "Your things packed?" She nodded, eyes downcast. "I found an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease until I figure things out." "Smart." She stepped closer. "Jack, you saved me from him. After everything I did to you, why?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd married was still in there somewhere, beneath the selfish choices and betrayal. "I didn't do it for you," I said finally. "I did it because it's who I am. Eric was in my home, threatening people with a knife. There was only one way that was going to end." "The police said if you hadn't subdued him—" "Sarah," I cut her off. "We're done. We were done the moment you decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. What happened with Eric doesn't change that." She wiped away a tear. "I made the biggest mistake of my life, didn't I?" I didn't answer directly. "Your move-out time is noon tomorrow. I won't be here. Leave your keys on the counter." As she turned to go, I added, "And Sarah, change your phone number. Block Eric on everything. Men like that don't just disappear." She paused at the door. "You still care?" "I care about doing the right thing. Don't confuse that with wanting you back." After she left, I walked through the empty house. For the first time since this all began, the silence felt peaceful rather than accusing. This house had been our dream once. Now it would be the foundation for whatever I decided to build next, alone, but on my own terms. 3 months after Sarah moved out, Pine Ridge Construction landed its biggest contract yet, a new community center downtown. The mayor made a grand spectacle of the groundbreaking ceremony, with local press and business leaders in attendance. "This represents a new chapter for our town," Mayor Wilson announced, handing me the ceremonial shovel as cameras flashed. I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, Sarah standing near the back, wearing a department store pantsuit, a stark contrast to her designer wardrobe of just months ago. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. Later that evening, I was reviewing blueprints in my office when Tom knocked on my door. "Got a minute? There's someone here to see you." To my surprise, Lisa Chin walked in, the architect I'd hired for the community center project, and coincidentally, the first woman who'd truly sparked my interest since the divorce. "Jack?" she smiled, setting a folder on my desk. "Didn't expect to see you tonight. Thought you might want to see these concept sketches sooner rather than later." We spent an hour going over her designs, our conversation flowing effortlessly from professional to personal. When she mentioned grabbing dinner, I found myself accepting without hesitation. At Giovanni's, we claimed a corner booth, talking and laughing over pasta and wine. It felt good, normal, in a way nothing had for months. "So," Lisa said, twirling her linguine, "rumor has it you're Pine Ridge's most eligible bachelor. Should I be intimidated?" I chuckled. "Hardly, just a guy rebuilding after a rough patch." "I heard about what happened," she added apologetically. "Small town. For what it's worth, I think you handled it with grace." Grace wasn't my first instinct, I admitted, but somewhere along the way I realized letting anger drive wouldn't get me where I wanted to go. "And where's that?" she asked. I considered the question. Just forward. After dinner, as we stepped onto the sidewalk, Sarah emerged from a nearby shop. She froze when she saw us, her eyes darting between me and Lisa. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah straightened her shoulders, nodded politely, and continued walking. "Ex-wife?" Lisa asked quietly. Yeah, I watched Sarah's retreating figure. First time I've seen her since she moved out. Want to talk about it? I turned back to Lisa, realizing with some surprise that I didn't. The sight of Sarah no longer triggered anger or pain, just acknowledgement of a chapter closed. Actually, I'd rather hear more about your ideas for that rooftop garden you mentioned. Lisa's smile was warm as we continued down the street. Behind us, I sensed Sarah watching, witnessing a man who hadn't just survived her betrayal, but had used it as a stepping stone to something far, far better. 8 months after our divorce was finalized, I stood supervising foundation work on the community center when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to talk to you. Important, please. Sarah. I nearly deleted it, but something made me hesitate. After a moment's consideration, I texted back, I'm at the construction site downtown until 6. At 5:45, Sarah's sedan pulled into the temporary parking area. She looked different, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her previously highlighted hair now its natural brown. The expensive jewelry was gone too. Thanks for seeing me, she said, glancing around the busy construction site. This is going to be impressive when it's done. Should be finished by next spring, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What's so important? She took a deep breath. Eric's getting out on parole next week. My jaw tightened. He'd received 18 months for the break-in and assault charges, but apparently good behavior had shortened his sentence. His cousin works with me at the department store, she continued. He said Eric's been talking about settling scores when he gets out, specifically with you. Why tell me this? You could have called the police. Sarah looked down. I did. They said they can't do anything until he actually does something. She met my eyes. I couldn't just say nothing, Jack, not after everything. I nodded, appreciating her warning despite our history. I'll handle it. That's what I was afraid you'd say. Worry creased her forehead. Jack, he's dangerous. He's not stable. Neither am I when someone threatens me or my people. I gestured toward the workers finishing up for the day. 30 families depend on me running this company. I'm not going to let some ex-con with a grudge interfere with that. The next morning, I made 3 calls, one to my attorney, one to the parole office, and one to Steve McKenzie, Pine Ridge's police chief and my longtime friend. So, let me get this straight, Steve said when I visited his office. You're not looking for protection, but to protect him from himself. Something like that, I replied. He needs to understand the consequences before he makes another mistake. 2 days later, Eric was escorted directly from prison to a meeting room where I sat waiting with Steve, the parole officer, and Frank. Eric's swagger faltered when he saw me. What the hell is this? An opportunity, I said calmly, to make better choices than last time. Frank slid documents across the table. Restraining order prohibits you from coming within 500 feet of Mr. Reynolds, his properties, or his business locations. And this, Steve added, placing another paper down, is notification that any violation of the restraining order will result in immediate parole revocation and return to state prison. Eric's face flushed with anger. You can't do this. Already done, I replied. I'm not looking for revenge, Eric. I just want to be left alone to run my business and live my life. So you call on favors with your cop buddy, he sneered. I leaned forward. No favors needed. You broke into my house with a knife. These are the consequences. But here's something else. I placed a business card on the table. Tom Brady, foreman at Reynolds Construction. Call him when you're ready for honest work. Eric stared at the card, confusion replacing anger. Why would you? Everyone deserves a second chance, even you. I stood to leave. It's your choice what you do with it. As I walked out, I heard the parole officer telling Eric how lucky he was. He had no idea. That luck had nothing to do with it. Sometimes the strongest move isn't striking back. It's offering a hand up to someone who once tried to take you down. 1 year to the day after Sarah asked me for a divorce, I stood on the finished roof of the Pine Ridge Community Center, surveying the town that had been my home for nearly 2 decades. The grand opening was scheduled for tomorrow. The mayor, town council, and most of Pine Ridge would be there to celebrate. Quite a view, Lisa said, joining me at the edge. Her architecture firm had done amazing work, transforming my construction team's foundation into something truly special. Worth every minute of work, I agreed, putting my arm around her shoulders. The past 6 months with Lisa had been unexpected in the best possible way. A relationship built on mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than a constant need to prove myself. "How does it feel?" she asked, completing something this significant, exactly a year after my life fell apart. I smiled. Feels like perfect timing. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Just hired Eric full-time. Guy's actually a decent worker. Who would have thought?" I showed Lisa the message. "Your renovation project has a new junior carpenter, it seems." "You're a good man, Jack Reynolds," she said, studying my face. Not many would have given him that chance. I shrugged. Holding on to anger was getting heavy. Had to put it down somewhere. The rooftop door opened and Mayor Wilson emerged with several reporters. "There he is, the man of the hour. Jack, we're ready for those photos whenever you are." As we headed toward them, Lisa squeezed my hand. "By the way, I got the Henderson contract. We're officially expanding to Milwaukee." "That's fantastic," I said, genuinely proud of her success. The photo shoot took longer than expected, with the mayor insisting on shots from every angle of the building. As we were finishing, I spotted a familiar figure watching from across the street, Sarah standing beside her car. I excused myself and crossed over to her. "Place looks amazing," she said. "The whole town's talking about it." "Thanks." I studied her face, noticing the absence of the bitter anger that had been there the last few times we'd spoken. "How are you doing?" "Better," she nodded. "Got promoted to assistant manager, signed a lease on a real apartment, not just a month-to-month thing. Small steps." "That's good to hear." An awkward silence fell between us. "I saw Eric last week," she finally said. "At the hardware store. He was buying tools for his new job. He told me you hired him." "Tom did, but yeah, he's working out okay." Sarah shook her head in wonder. "A year ago, everything was so different. I thought I knew what would make me happy. I was so sure I deserved more than what we had." I didn't respond, but my silence prompted her to continue. "I had everything and threw it away. You had everything taken from you and built something better." She smiled sadly. "Guess it says something about both of us." Lisa called my name from across the street, waving me back for one final photo. "I should go," I said. Sarah nodded. "Jack, I'm glad you found someone who deserves you." As I walked back to Lisa and the waiting crowd, I felt the final weight lift from my shoulders. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what you're truly capable of building. Not just structures of wood and steel, but a life of integrity, strength, and genuine happiness. The man who stood on that rooftop wasn't the same one who'd been blindsided by his wife's betrayal a year ago. He was stronger, wiser, and finally completely free.